Hi guys, Luton here, back for another episode of Below the Line. This is the series where I answer your questions or your comments from the previous video. Then I talk about a new topic in the games industry or about a game. You guys leave comments to that down below, and then on the next video after this one, I will respond to those selected comments as well. This happens on a Tuesday and a Thursday each week, guys, so be sure to tune in on next Tuesday for a response to this video. And in the previous video we were talking about, does a game's player base become too big? Can it become so big that it actually damages a gameplay experience? And what does that mean? Now Ermi comes in with the first thought today and says, for the first question, does a big player base ruin the overall experience in a game? Most definitely. A big player base of unexperienced players is not great for one main reason. The developers will always hear the majority of players over the niche of players. Just look at Battlefield 4. Rush mode was unbalanced for the defending team since the attackers had helicopters. They didn't balance the problem, they straight up removed the helicopters and other vehicles. This was a terrible move, and most Rush games ended up with the attacking team sealed inside their base. My point is that the company only heard the mass of crying people and used a demolition hammer for a fix that only required a chisel. For example, adding an AA vehicle to defending team or encouraging the use of stingers and such. I use Battlefield as an example, but I could mention other games types from Dark Souls to War Thunder. It's a common issue, and this is really where we're getting to. This was the crux of the issue itself, which is this is not something which is isolated to FPS games. This is something which is becoming a broader and broader issue, where games are becoming bigger than ever before. I mean, that's the other thing to remember, is that games have, for the longest time, games were really quite a niche thing. I mean, just think of the stigma which gets associated there, the stigma which gets attached to gamers, and to a degree that's still there. People, when on my previous job, I'd have guys at work would mock me and be like, oh, games, those are just for kids, right, LT? And it's like, well, they didn't say LT, but but it is true, like, that there was always this stigma attached to gamers, right? And I think that's going away now. It's going away, and that games are becoming more and more and more and more mainstream. I mean, think about quotes where they say things like, oh yeah, gaming is bigger than the movie industry and stuff like this. And so we're starting to see issues happening in a literal gameplay, not just with games like Battlefield and FPS, but other things as well. Now, some people are going to say, oh yeah, well, that's been happening for a long time, but whilst that may be true, I think it has become exacerbated recently. Okay, next up, Marathon Runner, who says, I know I'm late, but I'd like to put my thoughts on the topic out there all the same. If a game's systems are not focused or don't make the player focused on an objective, that game will not make the player feel like they need to play the objective. Be a good teammate, take the game seriously. That's the feeling I've had with Battlefield 1. I didn't feel the game was leading me towards the objective, rewarding me enough to actually play the objective, and the level design of some maps didn't help this. Oftentimes I felt lost in these huge maps or had no idea where I was supposed to be or do. Oftentimes it felt better and more fun and easier just to try and kill other players, whereas with BF3 it felt more important to get to the objective and help the entire team out. Even if that caused you to die more often than you would kill, it still felt fulfilling and good to do and worth the effort in the end. That's something I've talked about for great length. As for games losing their tension, I'm not sure on your feelings about this game, but I'm assuming it's not positive. I would like to point you towards PUBG. I've been playing it for a while now, and the game gives me butterflies in my stomach every time I play. Team matches are a little bit less tension filled, but still involve some good communication, positioning, and on a high skill level. I may just be assuming this, but I'm guessing the somewhat unrealistic nature of the guns and vehicles, among other things, are probably turning you off, and that would be understandable. For me though, it's a game filled with a lot of tension that makes me want to do better in the next game and be a better teammate. Finally love the channel and stuff. Okay, thank you very much. Well, the thing is for me with PUBG is that, yeah, I really like it, but it's been struggle. I always struggle for time, guys. That's always the issue. It's like, I really do enjoy that game, and a lot of people obviously play it because it's a really fun game, but in between like planning, prepping Zeus stuff, editing, streaming, doing other bits and pieces, it's hard to kind of fit in other things around that. So yeah, that's one of the reasons why I haven't played so much PUBG. But I totally agree that that is a game where there's a massive amount of tension, but then on a free-for-all massive map situation, you're gonna get that. Whereas I think on Battlefield it's literally the opposite, where you are kind of like face to face constantly face. And again, so over time you get kind of desensitized to it. You get desensitized. You're like, I got another guy, and it, like I said before, it just starts to feel very whatever, And that's something to do with the pace of the game, and that's one big change with the recent Battlefields, the pace. I always said this was one of my favorite things with Battlefield, was that it was a game which allowed you to have space to breathe and to think about the moves you wanted to make. And I think more and more that has just gone away. It's like you can't move. You're up, then you're down, then you're up, then you're down, then you're up, then you're down, and then you're left and you're right, and you're here and you're there, and you're and it's like you can't breathe, you can't think about what you want to do, and it's like, so it's no surprise that people don't actually make objective team plays or even work together, because they don't have time to think, because just every time you're up, you need down, up and you're down, and you just shoot, and you know, down. It's just, it never ends. It's just so intense and so full on all the time that it kind of doesn't become intense and full on. Does that make sense? It's like, you know, there's so much engagement that it actually becomes quite mundane, which seems weird, but when you really think about it, it makes sense. Now, I like to give comments which agree as well as disagree, so Dev here says, ranking system is not a solution. You give Overwatch as an example, that is a terrible ranking system. It's not based on your performance, it's focused on team, and if you're going to solo queue, you enter a fucking lottery to win or most likely lose. That's a fair point. And the fact that Overwatch is not skill-based like Quake or RTCW, whatever, CS, where you can pull off 5 versus 1 if you're really good in Overwatch, you just can't. That's not strictly true, though. I mean, you can, if you're good at Overwatch, you can, but I guess maybe he's thinking more along the lines of ranked, where people really know what they're doing rather than just random pubs and stuff. Here's what needs to be done. Remove ranks and progression. Give us what we pay for. This would mean an actual balance for all weapons. They're not going to do that. Allow dedicated servers. I think this would really help. They should do that. They should have done it a long time ago. Better modes, objectives. Remember, again, I wish you wouldn't abbreviate things like this, because I've got no clue what you're talking about. Not this shitfest domination all the time, go here, hold this, or go here, it's a fucking mess. Yeah, I mean, you know, domination, I actually really like it because it's fast, intense gunplay, if that's what you're looking for, but for example, Chainlink was kind of like a combination between domination and conquest, and that was a really, really good game mode, and I've talked about that a lot. Better maps, feels like maps are made by idiots, everything is placed so randomly. Again, maps for Battlefield, the guys that make the maps are very experienced, but I wonder what their criteria is in terms of, you know, aesthetic versus playability. You would like to think that it was very well tested and so on, but sometimes, yeah, you question it. Mod support, again, never going to happen. Last thing, big community. If you make a good game, I mean skill-based where skill matters, maybe many people would buy the game, but they won't stay for long. Battlefield COD have huge communities because the game is so easy. Literally anybody can pick up the game and be good. Make the game as it was before early 2000 and normal sized communities will return. But there's no money in that, so yeah, well, I mean, there you go, you hit the nail on the head. And I think the thing is, you know, you got some good points in there, but ultimately a lot of these things are kind of, you know, this is the thing, you've got to kind of work around what you have, and to a degree, a lot of the things you're kind of talking about, it's just, we know realistically it's not going to happen, so you kind of have to put, you know, you got to kind of just play the hand that you're dealt and try to work with that. And that's why I say it's important we don't go down these roads of kind of like allowing microtransactions to bleed into game, because once it's bloody there, you'll be damned if you can get rid of it. And that's what I'm saying, is like, you know, DICE and EA, they've always been real strict about sort of modding and stuff. You know, that's not, it's just not on the table. It's not going to happen. Okay, next up, Captain Flapjack says, "Hey Luton, spelt wrong. I have to say that I do agree with you that there should be some sort of ladder system in most, if not all, FPS games. As you said, this would most likely balance out the majority of matches so the player can have the best experience possible, matching the better, more serious players with others like them. Same for the lower end of skills. I feel, yeah, screw those low skill guys, just chuck them in a room together. I feel like this would really even the playing field and create a more challenging, thoughtful game style for more serious players, while providing the less serious and lower end skill players with a group of players that's like, yeah, similar, inverted commas. I think Rainbow Six Siege has done this quite well, as the ranked and casual player attempts to create a separation between the hardcore players and those that just want to have a laugh with some friends. The ranked play in Siege also offers a fairly broad coverage of skill levels and is fairly easy to get into, so that if a casual player maybe does want to have a serious game or two, they can hop into a ranked match, see how they fare against others. Although this solution is not perfect, I think if FPS games came with ranked and casual as standard, then they would maybe become more enjoyable overall. I think that's something everybody probably can agree on. It's just that implementation, and can it be executed properly? Can they find a good way of actually matching skills up? But I genuinely believe, like, you know, of the things that we should be trying next, this is next in line to be tried out, and I really hope that they can give it some serious consideration for the next Battlefield game. Right, get ready for this, guys, because Captain Crunch has written us a small novel today. On the poll question of gigantic player bases damaging the game, it does. The reason why it does is because everyone wants to be heard on what makes the game great and what should be balanced. We saw in Battlefield 3 the circle nerfs because DICE would not stop listening to people complaining about how something was overpowered. This is a thing which happens in many games for a long time, by the way. And so they would reduce a weapon's damage and the community found the next weapon, and DICE would reduce the damage, then the next, and the next, and the next. I saw weapons get adjusted several times while playing BF3, and it finally came to the point where DICE said, "We're done, everything is good now." And it wasn't. Again, I can apply this to many multiplayer online games. This is the kind of thing which just happens at length and has done for a long time. DICE also came out and said, we don't know what makes Battlefield great. And that's a problem, because that means they don't know what the core foundation to their game is, and so everything is on the table for change. You have a large, well, look at Hardline, and you have a large community that drowns out each other and puts in counter arguments and shouts down other people, and you get changes that never should have been made. I'm a close quarter player, and I play more TDM domination than Conquest nowadays, and some of the reason is because balance is broken when it comes to map design and vehicle layout, and how to counter vehicles for vehicle versus infantry gameplay. In BF4, people complained over and over to DICE about how the maps where you could get on rooftops or cranes were broken. Instead of DICE standing firm and saying you need to adapt and learn the weapon kits to overcome those people on the roofs and cranes, they took away ladders, turned multi-level vehicle horizontal playing maps into flat vertical only, and because nothing else was changed on the map, those smaller maps became great shotgun high rate of fire weapon maps, and people started complaining that shotguns and high rate of fire weapons were OP. The community ended up causing more issues. If DICE understood their core foundation, actually made everything rock, paper, scissors, and stood firm on that foundation, that are changes that are not to be made to this core, then a large player base would not be damaging. Instead of people learning the game and overcoming the problems through thinking, they believe the only way to play their game is that must do everything they can to change it to their way, and it's why the servers end up with stupid rules, and if you play half a decent way, you get banned. Old Man Warning, he finishes up with, back when I played BF2, when you did really well, people tried to recruit you into their clan, and if you put stupid rules on your server, they'd violate the ROE and get shut down if they were not removed. Now today in BF1, private servers are pretty much shunned, and DICE EA is running the show because the problem has become so huge, and for some reason today, DICE doesn't know how to fix that other than to run their own authorized servers, adding cost to a game. Anyway, as long as the entire community is listening to the game, will always be a state of change and broken design. Now, there's quite a lot to break down there, but I think essentially where you're coming down on is that the community has changed a lot. People constantly want everything to be sort of fixed, and it kind of like how I've spoken about before, I think there's this weird thing with Battlefield which people almost seem kind of turned on by patching. It's really weird. There's like the Battlefield players have got a fetish for patching the game. It's kind of like, oh god, gotta get those weapon changes. Oh my god, I need to get those weapon fixes. How different are the stats gonna be, dude? Oh god, it's like, dude, just play the game. Like all these fucking like going on and on about like the patches constantly, and just like over obsessing about the kind of small amounts of damage detail. Like I said before, I've had this conversation many times. It's my firm belief that yes, of course, some weapons are going to beat other weapons in certain situations, but if you are a decent player and you understand kind of the general principles of the game, the general layout of the maps, and the general sort of tactics that you can implement when it comes to kind of pushing a point, retreating, working with a squad, it's like that stands you in a million times better stead than just whether a slight change in the fire rate of a weapon or whatever. And it also comes back to people not taking personal responsibility. This is the thing that I've said for a long time. It's actually just an internet thing as well in general. It's just like a modern day kind of person that's online thing, is people don't take personal responsibility for anything. When you look at when I play with Arma, if somebody fucks up, you expect them to screw up. If you're playing a game which involves raiding and working with other people, like an MMORPG or something like that, then you're relying on personal responsibility. If somebody screws up, they weren't healing you right, then you need them to speak up and say, yeah, that was me, dude, I fucked up. And then you go, okay, we know what that was then, so next time just don't do that. Okay, but in these kind of games, it's like everybody wants to blame something else. What do they always say? A bad workman blames his tools. Now, again, I've never said I'm the best gameplay, but usually if I screw up, I know that it's on me, not necessarily on the weapons or whatever. In fact, again, I've said this recently with Rainbow Six Siege. It's like if I screw up at something in Siege, I'll call it and say, damn, that was me, sorry. It's very actually rare in Siege where like I turn a corner one-on-one someone and I go like, oh my god, that was such bullshit. It's like, doesn't happen very often. In the same way that even with Battlefield, again, it's pretty unusual. There's a few times where I'm like full on engaging someone who's right in front of me. I'm just like, what the hell is going on here? Like, how come I didn't get that guy? But it's not that common. And I think people just are way too quick to find other things to blame stuff on. Do you know what I mean? So I think that comes into play. But I think, again, that comes back to the audience change. The audience change and looking at how it is that people sort of engage with these kind of things. Instead of looking for the kind of constructive reasoning, they're always just looking for things to blame as to, why they're not getting screwed over or something. Okay, next up, Snowstalker says, yes, large audiences ruin multiplayer games, and they always have. This isn't new. As it's hard for some people to believe, a lot of people are just happy running around and shooting the red dots. That is not hard for me to believe. The problem is that a lot of games now don't have any sort of organised play to be a refuge for players who want a more advanced competitive version of that game sometimes. I do agree about that. You used to see these pop up as a player-added system in almost everything. It's how competitive gaming got going in Counter-Strike, COD and BF2. Now it's esports or regular. There doesn't seem to be anything in between. I think it's a side effect of many games dropping mod support in favour of selling DLC. I think that's debatable. Many of these player-organised competitive modes require mods to help run things, which is very true. So if the game didn't include built-in tools, that is very difficult. Again, that's a good point. You primarily played the games, and I don't think the BF series has ever had official support. I've been very excited watching Wargaming's experiments to add more organised and competitive modes as a regular feature of their games. None of them have quite worked so far, but they clearly understand the problem and what it takes to address it. And you know, that is kind of interesting. It's interesting that they have sort of taken note of this as, like I say, you know, this isn't something necessarily specifically related to Battlefield. I actually think this is like a wider issue, but it is interesting to hear like kind of Wargaming are sort of taking note and kind of pushing in that direction. But yeah, when it comes to saying like, you know, you get kind of smaller groups within a game that want to kind of focus on that competitive team play, again, it's something like what I have done previously in Battlefield with Battlefield 3 and Battlefield 4, and like I say, I'm sort of ongoing thinking about that at the moment, whether I want to kind of bring some element in there back. We played some games of BF4 yesterday, and straight away it was like I got that feeling that I haven't had for quite a long time, a lot of excitement in there, and I know that people want that, so I am in the process of sort of bouncing around ideas about what I can do in related to trying to help other people as well as myself get that kind of experience back. Okay, next up we've got Viscera Avalanche, who says, honestly Luton, you're right, also spelt wrong. For God's sake! You're right about a lot of things, but regarding Battlefield specifically, I've been a Battlefield only player for a long time. Things have been the same since at least Bad Company 2, probably earlier. That is definitely not true. You get some great matches and some matches where half of each team only cares about their personal stats or only puts the game in every once in a while anyway, so they just don't care about anything at all. I've not seen the same change, or rather I have, but I think it happened in the gaming community as a whole and significantly earlier than just the past few years. Let me just say right there, I mean, I just don't agree. It's like, yes, it is an issue that's at large in the gaming community, but it is not true that it was the same back in, like, say, Bad Company 2. Now, look, let's be real about this. You did get games like that. This is what I keep saying to people. It's not that you didn't get the kind of games that I've been speaking about, but you get a lot more of them now. That's my point, okay? It's not that you never had this. It's not like every game you played back in Bad Company 2 or Battlefield 2 was like super ultra competitive and everyone was like right on the line. It's like move up, capture the flag. You know, it's like not every single round was like that, full of like try-harding, ultra-objective players. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm saying is that we have seen a deterioration in the general quality of gameplay over time. That's what I'm talking about. That's what I've been saying for a long time. It is like a trend. It is not like, oh, it was like this and now it's like this. That's not what I'm saying. And if you want more evidence, just point to the fact that, like I say, every person that I know who's like quite a serious FPS player used to all play Battlefield. Now they don't. Why? The reason they don't is because they've seen this change in the gameplay and they hate it. So if you want evidence, just go look around the community. That's what I'm talking about. Now it says, I wonder if you did not get a taste of better communities in smaller games and then returning to games like Battlefield had a change in perception based on your recent experiences. No. You remember the tough games in BF3 from the server you rented, advertised and policed yourself? No. With the intention of creating hard-fought matches, then come back after a hiatus to jump back into the melting pot of public matches, which can either be great or just plain silly. But he says, just an idea, take care mate, so it's all in good fun. But look, I just don't agree. I played multiple public games this week on BF3, BF4 and BF1, and you know, people keep telling me, oh yeah, go back to BF3, go back to BF4, the community is so much better there now. No, it's just the same. It's just the same. You know, we were just playing some rounds the other day on like BF4 Metro, and yeah, it was 64, alright, so, you know, put a pin in that, but same issue, you know, people not pushing up at the last minute, so it's those kind of things. Now look, don't get me wrong, this was still a big issue in BF4, and it was an issue in BF3, but like I say, it's just like, the community gets bigger and bigger and bigger with every Battlefield release, and therefore just over time you see that continued deterioration, the swelling of the masses, and it kind of, so it's just an issue at large. But I hear what you're saying, and I can understand the point you were trying to make about I've been away and I've played other things, but dude, it's only 6 months. It's not like I've been away for like 4 years. Okay, next up we've got Rob Shoot It, who wrote about both issues, but we're talking about the multiplayer. So he says, hey LT, been a long time since we had the interactions on the ruined multiplayer. I think the sense of community in multiplayer games have flown away from AAA games. This sense of community is like living in a village. You know everybody by face or name, may even say hi to them every morning. I don't know about that nowadays, but I think that was the strength of the older multiplayer games. You kind of knew each other by gamer tag. Today, AAA multiplayers are big cities, you don't know anyone, and everybody's pretty rude. The sense of community is lost, yet that doesn't mean the city has to be a shitty place to live in. The problem is that developers want everybody to be able to do good and have fun. This is the thing. Let's not make it too difficult. My favourite comparison is BF1 versus Verdun. Verdun says, okay, here is your class that plays by these rules. Deal with it and you'll succeed. Pick an MG class, you're going to be limited in your firing positions. You can only fire bipoded. Commander, mortar, spotter, have a revolver. Be a rifleman, here is a bolt action. That's what you get, nothing more. It's absolutely true, and that's really where we are with the Battlefield games. But Battlefield is a completely different game. Let's be real with that. It's just a completely different game. But I think they do go way overboard about kind of giving people too many options. You want to be able to have options. You want to choose how to play, but they just go way over the top and give people way too many options about what to do, and so you end up with no focus at all. Now, I wasn't too sure about this next bit here. He says, with BF1 incident felt like it was and story. You want to be a medic. You want to be an efficient rifleman. You want to be an assault to take out tanks and dominate CQC and use explosives on longer ranges. The balance between classes between both games is so different. In Verdun it's miles apart, where in BF1 they overlap, making the choice between classes less of a punishment. That couldn't be more true, especially with the changes they made to the medic for BF1 now, where they now basically have bloody, carbine assault rifle, essentially. It's just like, for fuck's sake, like, they gave people like the semi-automatic rifles, and then people are like, oh, it's too hard to use the rifle. So they're like, okay, we'll give you something that's a little bit more like an assault rifle. It's like, for Christ's sake, can't you just give it to people and then tell them to deal with it? He says, an assault is a little bit less efficient in medium to long range fight, where in Verdun a commander mortar spotter is screwed when he's against a rifleman at medium range. AAA devs don't have enough guts to punish players for doing something wrong, therefore playing as a team to counter each other's weaknesses is less beneficial to individual players because they have a 90% perfect package in one class. I think that's a pretty good point to make, and it is this thing of like, you're a superhuman. You are this guy who can jump off a building, drop down, take out 3 guys, throw a grenade, annihilate a tank, and it's kind of like, yeah, it's just kind of, you never feel like a sort of a soldier that's in the mix there. You feel like this ultra hardcore superhuman, which just, that's why I always felt like the trying to instill like this kind of history stuff into BF1 was just absurd, because it's so disconnected. There's such a disparity between the actual style of the gameplay. If they wanted to do something that was so disconnected from reality, why didn't they just come up with like an alternate history? Think about how cool and interesting that could have been. Then they could have invented weapons. They could have created like really interesting things, and then we wouldn't have had this whole argument about, well, this gun was used like one time for like a week in World War I, so now we're going to put it in the game. And it's like, also, it would actually make some, you would have some kind of feeling of like, okay, instead of running around with like a fully automatic like SMG all the time, because of course we all know that that's what World War I was about, right? It's just like, for God's sake, they could have gone in a really interesting direction by creating like an alternate history, and then it would have actually made sense to have these kind of overlays at the beginning of rounds where it tells you this alternate history and so on and so on. It would have been more immersive. It would have been more interesting. But this kind of weird sort of quasi kind of World War I inspired but not, and then it just throwing, we have to put the Battlefield stuff in to make it work, and just the whole thing would have made a lot more sense. And I feel like they could have focused a lot harder then on sort of balancing and setting up the gameplay, and maybe that would have worked better. Okay, next up we got Girodine, who says, sadly Lutin, I don't think we can. He's talking about me saying, can we turn around the state of multiplayer stuff? He says, people used to make games for the fun factor. Games sold because it was fun to play, and if it was not fun, the games didn't sell. That's all there was to it. But now, since everybody on the planet is a gamer, that includes very rich people, the whales as people call them. They are the real targets for these games now. This is why there is so much more DLC, microtransactions in every single player game. It's why Bethesda is pushing for paid mods on the PS4 mainly, because it stopped becoming let's make a fun game and more let's make an addictive game for the whales to waste money in. A lot of the problems now we have seen signs for years, namely in mobile games. Mobile gaming was considered the wild west of gaming, as it was never policed and anything went. And sadly, that system and way of thinking has infected infected every form of gaming. I said this such a long time ago, and it is so true. It's why you should pay attention to stuff like mobile games. The biggest example of this being microtransactions. While originally they were just for free-to-play MMOs, they got infected into mobiles into funding any free-to-play game, which transferred back to mainstream gaming in infecting sub-based MMOs and buy-to-play MMOs. From there to free-to-play games, they weren't MMOs. And then it's just been getting worse, infecting multiplayer games that you paid $60 for. People freaked out the first time it happened, and now they have it in single-player games like Dead Space 3, and you don't hear much anger or talk about it. This is so true. It is so true. And this is what I keep saying. And this is why I'm freaking out about stuff like Star Wars Battlefront 2. And you have people going, well, you know, it's not going to affect my gameplay experience, so I don't care. You fucking idiot. Like, if you don't stand up for it and you don't call this shit out for what it is, then a couple of, years down the line, you're going to be screwed, and this is going to be the norm, and everyone's just going to have to deal with this bullshit. It is infuriating. He goes on to say that that's just microtransactions, not including the other systems like season passes, pre-orders, DLCs, and other anti-consumer stuff that people freaked out at first when it happened, but then the next time it happens there's less hate and less till it's the norm. I wouldn't say hate, I'd probably just say criticism. Like you pointed out in the video, people keep saying everybody knows that X is a problem, but knowing X is a problem and doing something about it are very different things. Nobody likes microtransactions in anything that is a free-to-play game, but other than complaint, did he mean other than free-to-play games? I don't know. But other than complain, they don't do anything. Unlike me, you, and the guy you quoted, it said everybody owns Battlefield, that was Drewski. I can honestly say I don't own a single Battlefield game, nor COD game, nor the new Star Wars Battlefront game, nor pretty much any game in the last 5 or so years, because the games, to me, aren't fun anymore. Although, I think, to be fair, like, a lot of people that are watching this video do buy these games. I don't think, like, you should just say, well, I haven't bought anything for the last 5 years. But, these things are an issue that needs to be discussed and addressed. Microtransactions, season passes, pre-order bonuses, and DLC gated content aren't things I like in supporting games, so I don't play those games. Fair enough. Sadly, people like me don't matter, because for every 100 people like me making a game lose a few $1,000s in sales, there is one whale feeding that game tens of thousands of dollars in microtransactions, DLC, season passes, and pre-order income. Well, again, this is similar to what I discussed in the video where I was talking about, I was using the analogy, the South Park thing, where they're talking about exploiting those heaviest users, finding the people that will spend $100, $200 through microtransactions. You find like a few of those guys and bang, you're rinsing them, and it's like, that's where it's bad. It's bad ethically, and it's bad because over time it starts to infringe on mechanics and stuff for other players too. Anybody that's kind of just trying to give this a free pass and just like say, oh, it's not a big deal, it's a big deal. It's a big deal when it comes to microtransactions. But, the community at large, which is what we were talking about today, it is an ongoing problem. And it's not just a problem for Battlefield, it's an ongoing problem, at large. I want to see people sort of starting to talk about this more. I want to see developers starting to address this more and be aware that it is an issue. It's nice to see that companies like Wargaming are actually kind of starting to become aware that this is something which needs to be addressed. And, as a industry leader with like DICE and EA, I would like to see those guys start to address it as well. I will try to have some conversations, and also, like I've said, if that means that I have to start setting up, I really should have seen that trap right there. If I start to set up some kind of internal communities that focus on these kind of things, then that's, it'd be a help, it'd be a nice step in the right direction. But I'm only one person, I can't make a whole thing change myself, and this is what I've said about before. If I do go down the route of trying to start up a community which focuses around working together, but not just working together, about kind of focused play and sort of trying to get the best out of the game and all this kind of stuff. If I start something which goes down that road, people gotta support it, because in the past when I would host a server for Battlefield 3 and Battlefield 4, people would only play when I played. And I quite honestly, like, you guys got to help yourselves, right? So if I start up a community soon, like say on Discord or something like this, and I'll probably make a separate video, but if I start up a community where I start it up to try and have people have focused, balanced, good gameplay with one another, which involves an element of sportsmanship as well, if I start to go down that road and I put time into setting up a Discord, I don't know if I will require to get a server or whether we just play on blank servers that already, are DICE hosted or whatever, whether it's across BF3, BF4, Battlefield 1, whether it's other things too. I have like various small communities of my own that I have set up already. I have BSO, I have my own private Discord for people that support me on Twitch, Patreon, and people from this who I've selected their comments and invite them to the Discord. But, if I go down the route of trying to do some other community element, you guys got to be involved. You know, people can't just turn up, play a game and then log out. You got to actually get involved. People actually have to be involved, promote it, work together, be ambassadors for this kind of stuff. You know, you can't just jump in and be like, damn, that was some good games. If people genuinely want to see like some changes here, people need to get involved, actually believe in what it's all about, and actually start sort of recruiting other people, talking about the issue, sharing it, telling other people like, hey, have you heard about, you know, this thing that this guy is doing? You know, come and check out the Discord, come and check out the gameplay servers, come and, you know, get these games. You know, that's the kind of thing you need to be doing. It needs to be actually proactive, because if it's just me hosting some rounds and people just come in and play some rounds, that's not doing anything. All that is just me hosting some games, people come in and have a few good games, you know, and that's not really doing anything. What I want to see is I want to actually see, and I hope that maybe if I do sort of go down this road, then maybe EA and DICE can actually sort of get involved and try to, you know, not in a really big way maybe, but just, you know, share things a little bit, just occasionally mention like, hey guys, if you're looking for more objective team play, Luton hosts some servers, you can find this and this and this. You know, that's the kind of thing that I would like to see us kind of work towards. That's the kind of thing in the past I've actually tried to approach them from and just never really got any pushback from. You know, they kind of never really sort of, I tried to speak to community managers in the past about the idea of hosting team play, like when we were getting into Hardline and BF1, it was like, and I just never made any like they were just like, yeah, well, no, you know, whatever, they're just not interested. But maybe things will change now, I don't know. Okay, but anyway, if you have thoughts about any of these comments, guys, drop that down below. If you have thoughts about this issue, drop that down below. We're going to go on now, we're going to talk about the next topic for the next comment section video, which is going to come up on Tuesday. So here we go. So the next topic is surprisingly this deal with Activisions Patent about microtransactions in matchmaking. So one of the stories this week was covered in Ars Technica, and it is this Activision, it's a patent to drive microtransactions with matchmaking. I mean, fuck my life. This story really goes to the core of what I've been talking about this week. You give these guys even a little amount of space to breathe when it comes to in-game monetization, and they will have the boots off of your feet before you are dead. This is why the issue with Star Wars Battlefront 2's loot crates should not be dumbed down and simplified to, it won't affect me, so I don't care. That is grossly simplistic, selfish, and an ignorant attitude to have. Anybody that tries to tell you that the reason you don't care about loot crates or kind of in-game DLC monetization is because it will not affect you personally, your personal gameplay, that person is a fucking idiot. This system from Activision talks about how and this is a quote, the system may match a more expert marquee player with a junior player to encourage the junior player to make game-related purchases of items possessed and used by that marquee player. An Activision rep said that this was just an exploratory effort from a disconnected R&D team and is nothing implemented in-game. But, just as I've been saying repeatedly, this demonstrates the thinking process going on behind the scenes. It shows where they are attempting to take a game towards or games towards. In the same way as we see loot crates in Star Wars Battlefront 2 now being not just for aesthetics, but for real gameplay changing cards. Where things get really slimy though, is where it describes how a matchmaking system could, and again quoting, encourage future purchases by matching the player in a gameplay session that will utilise game-related purchases, and that doing so may enhance a level of enjoyment by the player for that game-related purchase, which may encourage future purchases. So it's disturbing that despite this patent being filed in 2015 by Activision, it shows, if anything, long-standing efforts from these AAA companies to exploit money from gamers by directly creating algorithms and game matchmaking. This past week we saw EA DICE do similar things in Star Wars Battlefront 2 by showcasing a game system whereby the core mechanics are directly affected by people being able to make microtransactions. The fact that EA so quickly reacted to pour water on the flames shows that they know exactly what they were trying to do. They were kicking down to the community, and that's why they were fast to tell people how they're going to tweak it, and that it's not going to be as bad as you think. So now, do you guys think I was overreacting when I called for people not to purchase Star Wars Battlefront 2? Because mark my words, if gamers don't wake up and start actually not buying games which incorporate these kind of systems, then these in-game mechanical microtransactions are going to become the new norm, just as season passes, premium, and even DLC itself came before it. So that's the topic for this week, guys. If you have opinions about that, about Activision's in-game microtransactions related to matchmaking and pairing of players, tell me that down below. This next episode of Below the Line will come up on Tuesday, guys, so that's when it's going to be coming along the line. Of course, tomorrow is Friday, and on Friday we always have Arma 3 streaming, so if you want to come and join us, we start 9:30 p.m. GMT on Fridays. Come join in for that. I always have a couple of streams as well on a Sunday, guys, if you want to come and join in for there. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed this episode, guys. I'll see you next time, Tuesday, Below the Line.